of us love stories where there's a happy ending, the protagonist emerges victorious, right? Most of us present here. And so when I was invited to speak at TEDx, I decided to share some of my favorite stories with you. Well, it was a really tough job, I must say, to choose just a few of them. So what I'm doing is I'm sharing some of the inspiring stories that are my favorites with you today. And as I speak, you can try guessing who these stories are about. He experienced severe speech delays as a child. He had trouble socializing. One of his teachers said he would never amount to much. In fact, he repeated sentences till he was 7 years old. That is Dr. Albert Einstein. Not only was he a Nobel Prize winner, but the man gave the world E is equal to mc square. The next story is one which is close to my heart. She didn't speak till she was 3.5 years old. Doctors recommended that she be institutionalized. And all through school, she was considered weird. She was teased. She was bullied by her peers. That is Dr. Temple Grandin. She is a renowned author. She's a Colorado State University professor. In fact, she has been named Times Magazine's 100 most influential people. HBO has made an Emmy-winning biopic about her life called Thinking in Pictures. The next story that I'm about to share is about a man who's slightly reclusive, so he may be a little harder to identify. In school, he was teased and called Dr. Bug because he had a strange affinity to collecting bugs. He hated going to school and would often skip classes to go to arcades and play games. He even had to redo high school just to complete his diploma. That is Satoshi Tajiri. He is the man who invented Pokemon, which, as we all know today, is a worldwide phenomenon. The next one is one of my favorite stories, and I'm pretty sure you've heard of this person. He was bullied while he was in middle school, to a point where he even had to change schools. One of his high school teachers said that he would usually be off in a corner doing something by himself and didn't want much of anything to do with his teacher or his peers. He dropped out of college just 1 year after attending. And he was ousted from a company that he co-founded when he was 30 years old. You guessed it correctly. That is Mr. Steve Jobs. Not only was Steve Jobs a change maker in the field of home computers and smartphones, he co-founded Pixar too, which, as we all know, has given us some of the most innovative animated movies of our time, such as Toy Story and Finding Nemo. There's a common theme in all these stories, right? Each and every one of these individuals, they dared to think differently. They did not give up in the face of challenge. They persevered and, well, they came and achieved great success, as we all know. Now, I do agree that, there's a lot of greatness that inspires perseverance. But I also believe that it doesn't always take greatness to inspire somebody. Over the last 8 years, I have had the pleasure of knowing and working with some amazing individuals who have inspired me immensely to look at challenges as nothing but opportunities to learn. I am Radhika Bhatt, a psychologist and an early communications professional. A little less than a decade ago, fresh out of grad school, I began my career as a psychologist. And I started working with this lovely little boy. This boy could pick up any tune and sing it beautifully. For that matter, he would even mimic sounds such as an ambulance siren with uncanny accuracy. He loves meeting people and enjoys interacting with them. Today, Rishaan is 16 years old. Rishaan is a performer. He loves performing for an audience. He also is in a band and, like most other teenagers, has his own YouTube channel, which is pretty interesting, by the way. You can check it out later. So, Rishaan has performed on KBC with his band, a special six-pack band 2.0. He performs for corporates, and in addition to that, he's pursuing his studies and finds time to create videos for his channel. Now, Rishaan has a diagnosis of autism. Rishaan's autism makes it extremely difficult for him to socialize with people. Imagine loving to meet people so much and not knowing how you can interact with them. Rishaan is also sensitive to sounds. Sounds such as thunder can really scare him. Sometimes a sudden balloon bursting can be very overwhelming for him. Well, these are just a few challenges Rishaan faces on an everyday basis. However, Rishaan chooses to use his sound sensitivity to hone his music and singing. Rishaan chooses to channel all that love he has for interacting with people into every performance that he gives. Knowing Rishaan, I have learned that any struggle can be converted into a strength. With effort, some help, and lots of determination. As I continued my journey with many amazing individuals, I met Janvi. Janvi is a sweet girl and, well, she sings Hindustani classical music. She's a performer. She enjoys playing the piano. She paints beautifully and she also loves to cook. Today, Janvi is 20 years old. She is learning Hindustani classical music at the Shankar Mahadevan Academy and regularly participates in any performances that they have. Janvi also attends a skills development center located in Mumbai where she is honing her cooking skills so that she can earn her livelihood in the food and beverage industry. Janvi too has a diagnosis of autism. Janvi's autism makes it very difficult for her to be in large groups. Janvi's autism also makes it hard for her to perform in front of an audience. Well, something that Janvi and her mom do before any big performance or before any gathering that she has to go to is that they sit down and they talk about all the feelings that Janvi will experience when she's at this event. The two big ones that come up are usually joy and anxiety. On most days, Janvi chooses the joy that she feels when she's performing. She chooses the joy that she feels when she meets people. This doesn't mean that the anxiety magically disappears, no. It just means that in that moment, Janvi is choosing joy and she's managing her anxiety with calming strategies that she's been taught. From Janvi, I have learned that it is our perspective towards a challenge that counts. It is the way we choose to react to a challenge that really matters. With every single child that I have worked with every single family that I have worked with, I have noticed something similar. And the stories of these kids and their families have taught me some extremely valuable life lessons which I would like to share with you today. The first one being with grit, resilience and knowing when to ask for help. Any struggle can be converted to a strength. Just like Rishaan does, he still struggles with sound sensitivity. He still struggles with socialization. But he chooses to convert that struggle into a strength by working on it every single day. Another important life lesson that I've learned is that in the face of adversity, it is our perspective that counts. It is what we choose to focus on that really helps us to learn and grow from that challenge. Just like Janvi, she chooses the feeling of joy. She chooses to learn from that experience and she manages her anxiety while doing so. When we think of any person with a diagnosis or a label, we instantly start thinking of them as a problem that needs to be solved, rather than an individual who needs to be understood. Each and every one of my kids is just so much more than that diagnosis of autism. Each one of them, they have so many skills, so many qualities that they bring. So let's start looking at those instead of reducing them to one single diagnosis. As Dr. Temple Grandin says, the world needs all kinds of minds. And honestly, what really defines normal? It wasn't that long ago that people who used a keyboard to communicate with their friends were considered extremely weird. Today, well, we call them teenagers. This just goes to show that the definition of normal is constantly evolving with the times. So, let's start thinking in a manner which is more neurodiverse, right? It's a very big word. When we think of neurodiversity, oh, such a big word, has a very simple meaning. It means that the world has different kinds of minds and that each person brings something special onto the table. If we as a community accept this neurodiversity movement and start looking at people for who they are, for what they bring, the skills that they have, we can thrive in an environment which goes beyond a diagnosis. As caregivers, as educators, and as members of this neurodiverse community, it is our responsibility to foster an environment which is conducive to growth, to foster an environment in which each and every child is motivated to be the best possible version of themselves that they can be. If Dr. Grandin would have been institutionalized like it was recommended by doctors at the time, the world would not have had the humane livestock handling facilities we have today. If Steve Jobs would not have been nurtured to begin Apple Inc. in his parents' garage, the revolution in the field of home computers and smartphones would have probably taken much longer. So, with this in mind, let's accept this idea of something called cerebral pluralism. Sounds like a really big fancy word, right? Has a very simple meaning again. All it means is that each brain is different, some more different than others. When we start thinking like this, we start thinking of the person's will that defines their destiny and not a diagnosis or a label. At the end of the day, the evolution of culture, the evolution of sciences, of arts, of politics depends on the diversity of minds and people present in the community. With this, I would like to make a small plea to each and every one of you present here today. Go back home, go into your communities and find just one child, one individual who has a diagnosis of autism. Spend some time with them, maybe a few hours over a span of a few weeks, just trying to understand the person behind that diagnosis. And you will be surprised to find another person with you who's accepting you for who you are. And at the end of the day, deep down at our core as human beings, don't we all want to and deserve to live in a community where each and every one of us is accepted, is respected and is valued for who we are and not some label or diagnosis. It is this belief that has led me to share my story of inspiration with you at TEDx today. Thank you.